Good evening once again. Today we are going to discuss about the shifting red lines in West Asia. And this I have taken directly from an article by General Hasnain in the Indian Express, in the New Indian Express. And यही चीज हम आज इसके बारे में बात करेंगे और ये बात करेंगे खुद लेखक के साथ जनरल हसनैन सर. Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. It's always a pleasure to be.
Thank you. Jai Hind to all our viewers.
So let me set the stage as to where we are going today. हमने देख लिया पिछले इस महीने से there was first an attack by Israel on Damascus on the Iranian embassy site where a major general was taken off of the Iranian forces, IRGC. He was also heading the Quds force there. Then Iran retaliated with over 300 rockets, missiles, and drones, which were, dealt with by Israel and the allied forces. Then Israel carried out an attack 3 days back, where they attacked only two places, Isfahan and Tabriz, both related to nuclear facilities. Though the attacks were not great, but they carried a lot of strategic significance, and there are repercussions of this both sides. And after that, there's been a bit of an off-ramp. उतना जो गर्मी था वो थोड़ा निकल गया है. पर बात यह है कि जो वेस्ट एशिया के पॉलिटिक्स, इट्स लाइक डेजर्ट सैंड, वो शिफ्ट करता रहता है, रेड लाइंस भी शिफ्ट करते रहते हैं. और आपने भी इस आर्टिकल में जिक्र किया है, अगर हम वी गो बैक इन हिस्ट्री, 79 से पहले इजराइल और ईरान का दोस्ती बढ़ा था. इनफैक्ट एक पाइपलाइन बन रहा था इन दोनों के बीच में, और इजराइल ईरान को काफी टेक्निकी मदद दे रहा था. पर उसके बाद 79 के बाद जब ईरानियन रेवोल्यूशन हुआ और अयतुल्ला खोमेनी केम बैक फ्रॉम पेरिस एंड टुक ओवर द रेन्स ऑफ इजराइल, थिंग्स हैव शिफ्टेड. और ये शिफ्ट जो है बहुत लोगों को समझ में नहीं आता कि ये हुआ क्यों. एक दोस्ती इस तरीके से दुश्मनी में बदल गया. और बात यह है कि इन दोनों के बीच में अगर अब हम देखेंगे तो ये नक्शा अगर हम देखेंगे तो तकरीबन 1500 से लेकर 1800 किलोमीटर का दूरी है. इनका कोई बॉर्डर नहीं है, इनका कोई ये नहीं है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है वैसे देखा जाए तो. पर आजकल ये इस वेस्ट एशिया में अगर कोई एक दुश्मनी, इफ देयर इज वन एनिमिटी व्हिच इज above everything else, it is the Israel-Iran enmity. And it drives West Asian politics. And it comes back to the red lines which keep shifting, as you said in your article. I think we need to understand this, and I would like you to understand because you researched and written on it. All yours, sir.
देखिए, ये बहुत दिलचस्प और अहमियत वाला सवाल है कि ये जो अच्छी खासी रिलेशनशिप थी ईरान और इजराइल के बीच में 1979 तक, ये जब शाह ऑफ ईरान के रूल में ईरान था, और इंडो यूएस ईरान रिलेशनशिप बहुत ताकतवर थी. सेंटो का वो जमाना था उस वक्त, इफ यू रिमेंबर, कोल्ड वॉर अपने हाइट पर थी. इजराइल जो था वो यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एलिमेंट था मिडिल ईस्ट में. It was considered as one of the most important horns on which US policy was based. साथ में ईरान था, जहां पर शाह ईरान थे. अब ईरान एक लिबरल काइंड ऑफ और नेशन था उस वक्त, नथिंग वेरी डीपली रिलीजियस एटसेट्रा, मगर बहुत सिविलाइजेशनली एक बहुत रिच, कल्चरली रिच रीजन था. जब रेवोल्यूशन हुआ 1979 में तो एक आइडियोलॉजिकल बदलाव आया, और वो उस रेवोल्यूशन ने इस्लामियत को वहां पर उसकी पैदाइश वहां पर दोबारा की, which became a very radicalized form of Shia Islam. I mean, when you use the word radical, I know people always would object to it, मगर मैं कहता हूँ कि जी हाँ, शिया इस्लाम जो है वो वहां पर अपने जड़ों के साथ वहां पर दोबारा वापस आया. The roots are all in Persia, ईरान. और एक राइवलरी शुरू हो गई जिसको आमतौर पर कहते हैं सुन्नी शिया राइवलरी, क्योंकि सुन्नी कोर सेंटर सुन्नी आइडियोलॉजी का सऊदी अरेबिया था और शिया आइडियोलॉजी जो थी वो उसकी पॉलिटिक्स इतनी ज्यादा अहमियत नहीं रख रही थी. 1979 के बाद जब ईरानियन रेवोल्यूशन आया तो शिया क्रेसेंट के बारे में लोग बात करने लगे. अजरबैजान से लेकर और ईरान और इराक के कुछ इलाकों में जहां पर तकरीबन 66% शिया पॉपुलेशन थी, यहां तक कि बहरेन तक इसके बारे में बात होती रही. अब इसमें देखा गया कि ईरान जो है, बिकॉज ऑफ दिस शिया ओरिएंटेशन, इट वांटेड टू टेक द अपर हैंड इन द पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ द मिडिल ईस्ट. वो तभी हो सकता था कि अगर वो सुन्नी सऊदी अरेबिया की सुन्नियत को दबा सकते. अब दिस बिकेम अ शिया सुन्नी राइवलरी, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट what happened was that United States और ईरान के बीच में इतनी ज्यादा अनबन थी कि anyone who was a friend of the United States in the Middle East automatically became an enemy. ईरान जो इजराइल जो इतनी अहमियत रखता था यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के लिए, suddenly overnight became an enemy, an adversary of Iran. साथ में ये बात थी कि ईरान समझता था कि अरब दुनिया ने, ये अरब वर्ल्ड विच इज प्राइमरली सुन्नी, अरब वर्ल्ड ने पैलेस्टीनियंस का हाथ छोड़ दिया. वो समझे कि 1978 के बाद खासतौर पर प्रोग्रेसिवली जो है ये जो सपोर्ट अरब्स को देनी थी पैलेस्टीनियंस को, वो पीछे पीछे हटते रहे और अपनी रिचेस को, अपनी the dollar incomes they were getting from oil and energy, उसको बढ़ावा देते रहे. Now this is where Iran caught the nerve of the whole issue और कहा कि अगर हम ईरान सपोर्ट दे पैलेस्टाइन को as against the amount of support be given by the Arabs, we will score higher in the Islamic polity. Islamic politics जो मिडिल ईस्ट में है उसके अंदर वो ज्यादा उनकी बढ़ोतरी होगी. So that is why they went all out. They knew that Saudi Arabia और rest of the Arab world जो गल्फ कंट्रीज थी, ये उस तरह का सपोर्ट नहीं दे रही थी क्योंकि इनको अमेरिका के साथ पेट्रो डॉलर्स के साथ इन चीजों के साथ ज्यादा लगाव था. And Iran felt that they had nothing to do with the United States. They would support the Palestinian cause and show its own importance in the Islamic world. That is why this adversary जो ये इनके बीच में दुश्मनी जो पैदा हुई वो इसके वजह से हुई. मगर इसमें बात ये थी कि इनके बीच में कोई बॉर्डर नहीं था. अब आप देखें अगर मैप को, जैसे आपने दिखाया था अभी, कि इजराइल के ऊपर लेबनान है, लेबनान के ऊपर सीरिया है, सीरिया के साइड में इराक है फ्लैंक में, और उसके बाद आता है ईरान. सो ईरान इज क्वाइट फार इन टर्म्स ऑफ बॉर्डर फ्रॉम इजराइल. तो कन्वेंशनल बॉर्डर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इनके बीच में नामुमकिन है. तो किस तरह की कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो सकती है? या तो मिसाइल्स की हो रही है. उन जमाने में मिसाइल्स 1979 के बाद 2000 तक ऑलमोस्ट उस तरह की पैदावार जो थी वो मिसाइल्स के दुनिया में नहीं हुई थी तब तक. बट ऑल्दो इजराइल वाज, ईरान वाज ऑलवेज ऑन द ट्रैक ऑफ एक्वायरिंग ग्रेट रॉकेटरी रिसोर्सेज ऑफ रॉकेटरी एंड रिसोर्सेज ऑफ मिसाइल्स. कहां से ला रहे थे ये? नॉर्थ कोरिया से, रशिया से, चाइना से. इस पूरी उम्मीद के साथ कि किसी ना किसी दिन उनको शायद इजराइल के साथ लड़ना पड़े, और अगर लड़ना पड़ेगा तो ये चीजें इनके, ये साधन जो है इनके काम आएंगे. दूसरी चीज जो ईरान ने अपनाई वो था कि क्योंकि हमारे लैंड बॉर्डर नहीं है इजराइल के साथ, तो हम इजराइल को किसी और स्ट्रेटजी के साथ एंगेज करेंगे. वो स्ट्रेटजी क्या थी? वही स्ट्रेटजी जो पाकिस्तान ने भारत के खिलाफ अपनाई कश्मीर में, प्रॉक्सीज, द यूज ऑफ प्रॉक्सीज. तो इन्होंने नॉर्थ में हिजबुल्लाह, around 86 Hezbollah came into being and gained prominence. Hezbollah लेबनान के इलाके में, सीरियन आर्मी जो लार्जली लार्जली शियाइट है, ठीक है, वो सीरिया में, और गाजा में हमास विच इज नॉट शिया. This wrong notion that a lot of people may have that Hamas is also Shia. It is not Shia. Hamas को was purely from the angle of supporting the Palestinian cause and pressurizing Israel from the western side. और द लास्ट वाला था यमन के जरिए. यमन से इतना ज्यादा इजराइल की तरफ नहीं जितना सऊदी अरेबिया के ऊपर. सऊदी अरेबिया को सराउंड करने के लिए, causing some kind of a proxy effect on them, उसके लिए उन्होंने यमन के अंदर सपोर्ट किया हुतीज को. तो आप देख सकते हैं कि ये तकरीबन तीन दिशा से तकरीबन इजराइल के ऊपर हावी होने के लिए, टू ट्राई एंड डोमिनेट देम, दिस स्ट्रेटजी हैज बीन प्लेड आउट फॉर अ फेयरली लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. आखिरी चीज जो मैं सिर्फ इसमें कहना चाहता हूं, इजराइल ने क्या तरीका अपनाया. इजराइल जानता है कि वो छोटा है देश, उसकी लैंड बहुत कम है, उसके पास जमीन और पॉपुलेशन भी कम है, उसके ऊपर काफी दबाव भी पड़ सकता है. उसने हिट आउट आउटसाइड एंड टारगेटेड दोज रिसोर्सेज इन लेबनान, इन सीरिया. अब वो गाजा में तो करते रहे, इन लेबनान इन सीरिया पर्टिकुलरली, टू मेक श्योर कि ये जितनी IRGC जो स्पेशलाइज्ड फोर्सेस है, कुद्स फोर्स जैसे है ईरान की, ये जो है इनके प्रॉक्सीज इस इलाके में सेटल ना हो सके. 2014 से 2018-19 तक तो ये बड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स इलाका था. यहाँ पर आईसिस भी थी, यहाँ रशियन ट्रूप्स भी थे, यहाँ अमेरिकन भी थे, इराकी भी थे, दुनिया भर के यहाँ पर फोर्सेस थी. बट उसके बावजूद अगेंस्ट द Iranian proxies, that is against the Syrian army and the Hezbollah particularly, Israel was always very, very proactive. तो ये है इसका बैकग्राउंड और ये है इसका इस वक्त का की स्थिति.
सर मेरा एक सवाल है which I've drawn from you only and what you have written and what you have spoken and of course what I have read also. वो ये है, अगर हम देखेंगे इस मैप को गौर से देखेंगे, ईरान has primarily two adversaries here, Israel and Saudi Arabia. Right? अगर हम इस येलो शीट देखेंगे, किसी ना किसी तरीके से either you look at it from the Arab point, Saudi Arabian point of view or the Israeli point of view, ये Iran has garroted both these countries with the militias. And if I summarize it, I feel Iran is waging an ideological, non-contact, indirect shadow war. So I'll use the words again: ideological, non-contact, indirect shadow war, right? Against Saudi Arabia and Israel. Against Saudi Arabia, it is the ideology is Sunni Shia divide. And with Israel, it is of course eradication of Jews from there and that. So would you say that this summing up is okay, the way you have constructed it?
All four very important strategic words that you have used actually form up what is called proxy war.
Okay.
ये सब कुछ proxy के साथ हो सकता है, shadow भी हो रही है, जैसे आपने कहा ideological war भी हो रही है. This is the essential content of proxy war. It's slightly different from the India-Pakistan context, क्योंकि India-Pakistan context में एक common border है, जिसकी वजह से infiltration का इसमें बड़ा रोल होता है. यहाँ पर वो रोल नहीं प्ले हो रहा है. यहाँ पर जो है सिर्फ सही कहा आपने, shadow. It is, you see, much of this war is being fought on Syrian territory. Lots of it is being fought on a third country territory. India-Pakistan के बीच में ये ऐसा नहीं होता है.
Right. So this puts the complete West Asia in turmoil, and that is why the red lines here are shifting day by day. हर दिन ये red lines shift होते रहते हैं. So we have, it's almost a permanent state. And let me make a comment, I would like your response on it. If you take this background and और आज का दिन जो हो रहा है इनके बीच में, अगर हम ये देखेंगे, and some kind of a cold peace, I won't say cold peace, a freeze, a semi-freeze is set into this area right now, temporarily. Where do you see this going? I mean, do you think this, I'm not talking of the conflict per se. This whole ideological divide and this shadow war. My view is this is going to be a endless affair. Your
Your
views on it?
surmise is absolutely correct. Some years ago, 21 years ago to be precise, I was visiting the State Department of the United States of America as a part of the Royal College of Defense Studies visit. And there I still remember being briefed, and very correctly, this aspect of the ideological war. They said this is essentially a reformation which is taking place within Islam, where every big major faith undergoes a reformation. We've had all major faiths of the world undergoing reformation. Islam also underwent a lot of reformation and counter-reformation very early in its existence in the first 6 to 8 centuries. Thereafter, from the 19th century, a movement started to try and take Islam back to the ages, the 7th century, when it was born, 632 AD to be precise, right? This, and against that, a counter-reformation is already on, which is the modernized Western thinking as against the radicalized Islamic thinking. Radicalized, I'm not using as a negative term. Let's call it fundamentalist thinking, right? So this war between modernity and should you say the original faith, the fundamentalist faith, is something which is going to occupy the Islamic strategic space for the better part of the next 100 years. I have always spoken about this in all my strategic talks on political Islam, etc. This is a proper political, this is the strategic way to look at this whole. It will continue for very long. That is why if you remember, you may have read it or not, when everyone suddenly spoke of the Chinese entering into the domain between Iran and Saudi Arabia and trying to bring about a peace agreement, I laughed at it. I
agree with
And
you, sir.
here is elements who have no understanding of civilizations at all. They are supposed to be the great civilization, but they have no understanding of this. Can you bring a dispute which is the better is old? You want to settle it in a matter of 2 months like this? So temporarily you can put tape on it here and there, but this is all going to come back, and sure enough, it has happened exactly like that. So I agree entirely with you. The better part, the Middle Eastern geopolitics is going to be stricken by this. It has been, even without the existence of Israel, this would have happened. The problem is the presence of Israel here and the presence of energy oil here, the presence of all the routes of shipping through this area has made this place a strategic stranglehold virtually. उसकी वजह से इसकी अहमियत इतनी ज्यादा बढ़ गई है that the world can't do without it. Just have a look at it. You see, it's virtually become the center of the world. And that is why every time the United States tries to get out, reduce the importance of this, sign the Abrahamic Accords, bring people together and hope like hell to be able to move its interest into the Indo-Pacific, it is always drawn back to this area. And that's exactly what we are witnessing at the moment. So what you are seeing, I mean, very, very briefly to summarize what I've said at the end and seeing the prospects ahead, this war, you may not see war fighting between Iran and Israel in the manner with which people understand war fighting. There are going to be tanks and artillery duels and things like that coming in. This proxy business will continue. Lots of testing each other's nerves. Lots and lots of messaging. If you see the last strike which Israel has made against Iran, it is to the very crucial strategic area around Natanz and that area around Isfahan, where the Iranian nuclear facilities all are. This is clearly to send a strategic message. Your areas are all in our focus. We can bring it all down. The US is on board with us, and we can do it together. This is the message. 2 missiles is sufficient to send home that message. For Iran, the message was, we are sending 300 missiles. We have got hell of a lot of missiles in our entire arsenal, and you can take them down. Doesn't matter. We are not causing you any destruction. You can take them down. But remember, we can bring many more. It's a battle of nerves, and it's a battle of messaging which is going on. People have to understand wars are not always about war fighting. Wars are a lot to do with messaging.
Yeah. Ultimately, wars have to be political in nature. The political outcomes are more important than the conflict. I think this is a ideal example which this thing, and where political conflict has ideological moorings, the outcomes are going to be more complicated. The inputs are also going to be more complicated.
Absolutely.
On that, sir, I've never had a doubt. Now, we'll come to the present a bit. I'm bringing it down because so that people understand what we have spoken. We have spoken a lot of things. Let's take the Israeli action. And before the Israeli action, we saw, हमने देखा कि पूरा दुनिया इजराइल को कोस रहा था और उसके ऊपर मानवाधिकार एंड जेनोसाइड के all blames were being put on it for whatever has happened in Gaza. उसके बाद बिल्कुल एक पासा पलट गया है. The moment it became an Israel and Iran conflict, the focus was on the direct conflict between Israel and Iran. That Israel has defocused its actions against Gaza, and now the focus is there. That is one major thing. But there's something else which happened today. I was speaking to General K.R. Rao in the morning, and he brought this point out. He said, whatever Israel has done against Iran has also split the Islamic world. Back the Tunisia dead has come in. Till now, Saudi Arabia and Israel were supporting Gaza and Palestine cause to a large extent, right? And they were all against Israel. But the moment it has become one against Iran, their whole pact, as what you said, has fallen off. Because whatever is Iran does now threatens Saudi Arabia. It's against Saudi Arabia. So how do you see this assessment that the split has come back again?
This has been a very smart step on the part of Israel. Particularly, you see the first April strike in Damascus against the IRGC, the death of the IRGC commander there. In fact, 12 people died altogether in that strike. That strike came out of the blue. And I mentioned in my original remarks that this has been happening over a period of time, from time to time, to essentially make sure that the IRGC, the proxies, the Syrian army, etc., do not ever feel comfortable and settled in these areas, matching their human resources with their other arsenal, the elements of the arsenal together, and feeling very happy that they can continue targeting Israel. This was the basic, essential aspect of it. But as you very correctly also say, it was a question of diverting attention from all these parleys on ceasefire in Gaza, the impending attack on Rafah, the huge 35,000 fatalities which the Palestinians have suffered, civilian fatalities which they have suffered in Gaza, all the manner in which the international community was turning around and pointing fingers at Israel. All the sympathy, the empathy that they had gained on the 7th of October had been turned around very effectively by the Arabs, or I mean, it was nothing to do done commonly, but by the emerging environment to bring the international community on a common platform, actually targeting Israel. And this had to be sort of overturned. I do feel that the United States was very much in sync with Israel, although it is said that it was not informed. And one of the things which came out after 1st of April was not informed before this strike took place. To my mind, the United States was very much a part of this strategy. It just had to, the denial had to be a part of the overall weaponry, but it was a smart act to take the attention away from the south and bring it to the north. If you notice one thing, all this while the Hezbollah in north from Iran, from Lebanon on the northern border, it has not used its full capacity, hardly anything at all. one or two forays here and there, one or two border firings, etc., to primarily just keep attention focused there and keep some of the elements of the Israeli army focused in that area. It could have done much more, right? But they wanted the Iran wanted the focus to remain on Gaza. What Israel has done very smartly is turned the whole attention around, and that's one of the reasons, perhaps, that Iran chose not to get tempted. I think it was smart journalship on their part too, smart strategic decision making on their part too, not to react, not to have a knee-jerk reaction to what happened on the 1st of April. They waited 10 days and did it after that. Thought through it, used, I would say, a sufficient part of his arsenal to do a strategic messaging, convey the message. If it had just been 2, 3, 4 missiles, that may not have conveyed the message, but it conveyed that message very correctly too, and said, and also conveyed it in the United Nations, conveyed it to the United States that we have done our bit and there will be nothing more thereafter. This was to take the attention back to Gaza, to make sure that what Israel had attempted to do in the area of the Levant, that there would be no continuum to that. So your understanding is absolutely bang on, completely. Today we are now in a state of balance where things are going on in Gaza. There's no let up on Gaza at all. No one is expecting a further response by Iran. There may be an odd strike which will take place after a few weeks somewhere on some part of Israeli main Israeli area, central Israel, Tel Aviv, or some place like that, from the Hezbollah side, which may invite once again a response. So every 6 to 8 weeks, this kind of a thing will continue to show relevance. Nothing more than that. This will be the strategy which will be used. I don't foresee all-out war. I don't foresee what people are prophesying, nuclear and this and that. No, it is not going near that.
That I agree with you. But I also feel that that peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia is almost in tatters.
It's almost in tatters, yes. Absolutely.
Tatters.
We have not heard of the Chinese in this entire ballgame.
I was coming to that, sir. I was coming to that. Right. Now the sequel to this is, or rather the adjunct sequel to this entire game, is yesterday United States has cleared aid to Ukraine and Israel.
Yes, $95 billion.
Billion. So that means the Ukraine-Russia story is likely to continue for a longer time with a greater intensity. I mean, that's a natural follow-up. With that, what do you think will be the role of Russia in this whole story? We'll come to China also. Because I think my opinion is Russia is going to get fixed there.
This is a very difficult question to answer at this stage, because
at this stage, I know
$95 billion package which has been put together, this is Biden's strategy. Biden had to survive it. He started the war. In fact, in his time, the war started. The whole trigger was actually essentially the backing of the United States that Ukraine received at that time. And he couldn't be seen to be backing out at the height of the presidential campaign at this particular time. So I think it's not from any particular strategic angle or a conflict termination kind of a strategy that the United States is actually providing this aid to Ukraine. I think it's not a clear-cut victory or anything like that they are seeking. They are only seeking at perpetuating, making sure there is no negative fallout before 4th of November. That's the time when the results are going to be declared. Yeah.
And I think also it keeps Russia pinned there and
absolutely.
Not spread its wings to Iran.
Absolutely. The Russian-Iranian tie-up, in fact, the Sino-Russian-Iranian tie-up is much more strategic and much more intense than what we care to think about. After all, Russia's ability to fight this war in Ukraine and obtain a virtual position of advantage today has been based upon the backing that it has received from China. We don't know how much of military aid it has got, but from Iran, it's definitely got a lot of
Yes,
aid,
lot of
a
aids.
tremendous amount of aid. And therefore, there will be a time when there will be payback. And as you very correctly said just now, it keeps Russia off. It keeps Russia pinned. The correct word you used, it keeps Russia pinned to the Ukraine theater and does not allow it to come here. Otherwise, Russia is a country, if you saw at the height of the ISIS issue in 2015, they moved in here very, very quickly. They moved here very quickly at that time, brought in their special forces, brought in the air force, and went to that famous port called Latakia, which is the northern part of Syria. Latakia, the airfield next to it. These are the few areas where Russia has still got fairly large strongholds over Syrian territory. And that's the only physical presence of their military resources. So Russia could be expected to come in a big way and support Iran in this entire thing. But at the moment, Russian focus is entirely on Ukraine, to the extent that Russia has even moved its 201 motorized division from Tajikistan and taken it into the battle in Ukraine for the moment, right? So you're right, absolutely, that this aid which has been worked out and for both the countries, three countries actually, Taiwan also, is with a certain purpose. It is definitely helping Biden, but you're very right, it is also helping to make sure that the Russians remain off from the Middle East for as long as it is possible.
Now let's turn to China's. What is China's game in this? Because actually, if you see, इस इलाके से चाइना को इस एनर्जी डिपेंडेंट, इसको तेल काफी चाहिए, इसका बीआरए प्रोजेक्ट्स यहाँ चल रहे हैं. It has got a lot of investments into this area, and at the end of the day, it is not able to influence events. The deal which it brokered is almost finished, and it has remained largely on the sidelines. अगर हमने आपको याद है हमने बात भी किया था, it has not acted against the Somali pirates. Its navy has not been active in this area. It has not been able to enforce peace. इसका जो मुख्य उद्देश्य था जिसलिए ये यहाँ आए थे जिबूती में एक बेस बनाने के लिए कि उनको ऑपरेशनल एक्सपीरियंस मिलेगा, वो भी नहीं मिल रहा है इनको. तो where does it leave China? And also we have to remember कि whether we like it or not, there's trouble in the South China Sea. South China Sea को छोड़ के यहाँ आगे ये लड़ाई भी शुरू नहीं कर सकते. China has been pulled back. So where do you see China? I've given you the
yeah, absolutely. See, ऐसा है कि इसमें ऐसी स्थिति है, अगर कल से India develops into a much larger power, military power. We don't know very much about Japan, South Korea, the area of East Asia, etc. And we step into it strategically to start looking for our interests there, and think that we can probably get some advantage in that area, outreach into the Far East and things like that. We would be stepping on breaking ice. Absolutely, it will be a very, very awkward thing. It is similar for China. This area is alien for China. China does not understand Islam, for one. It doesn't understand the culture of the Middle East at all. The only thing is of advantage for China, and it's a very important aspect, of course, is energy. Its entire growth process of the last 30 years has been based on the unimpeded movement of energy resources from the Middle East to the eastern seaboard of China, no doubt. This has been its major interest. It tried to step in here, thinking that now that it is, rising and hopefully thinks that it is competing against the United States, this is the time that it can probably step in, bring about certain, if the Americans can bring about the Abraham Accords, they can bring about an accord between Saudi Arabia and Iran and things like that. This is all imagination without going deeply into the strategic aspects of it. I many times suspect China is very good at analyzing and taking its actions and things like that. But when it comes to certain areas, they seem to have no understanding at all. And the Middle East is one area when I have always felt that the Chinese are very, very uncomfortable here. Therefore, when they announced at that time, within the step, November 2022, I think it was when they stepped in, and by February or so, they announced a
Yeah,
peace
they
accord
announced.
and this and that. We all knew what was there. It was all essentially to make sure that China's energy resources would remain absolutely safe and secure. But nothing of that kind has really happened. So I think now China is walking the talk very, very gingerly. Not sure which side to play, how to play. The Chinese, the Chinese diplomatic corps seems to be very silent. One of the explanations could be that this is the period the Chinese feel when people are focused on Europe, when they're focused on the Middle East in such a big way. This is the time to make hay in the South China Sea, and this is what they're doing with Philippines. This is what they're doing with Indonesia in this area, trying to gather their strength a little bit more out here. So this it could be. I mean, it could turn out to be a very smart kind of a ploy. But if China is looking to be a world power, this huge economy now and its large armed forces, a large navy to be ultimately in the future, China has to play its role in a place like the Middle East. Very correct observation of yours. Not playing a role in the Somali piracy. Of it. Initially, it did come in and play a very positive role, but subsequently, this time they stepped back. They feel that let others handle it. And perhaps they think that that is the smarter way to deal with things at the moment, gain information and knowledge, and then only perhaps step into this area. I think it may be a little too late for China because the situation is developing very, very rapidly here. I don't see how much the future of the Abraham Accords is going to be unless Trump comes back as president or whatever it is. There are already fair amount of dislocations in the relationships which have existed from the last 10, 20 years in the Middle East, which have been reasonably stable. You find these are now, sort of looking more fragile. So I think it's a very tenuous situation for China.
Right.
They need to be more decisive in what role they actually perceive themselves to play here.
That's fine, sir. Uh, I think that's a very correct assessment. China is in a corner. It doesn't know what to do. Which way it will go. We'll see where it gets its opening. But let's get to Pakistan. Today, the president of Iran is visiting Pakistan,
Yeah.
and they are talking of a $10 billion deal, right? So they are looking at increasing relations with Iran. So that's a statement of fact because this is what Dawn has reported today. But we also have to understand Pakistan has been bankrolled by Saudi Arabia to a large extent. So that connection is there. So they have to first, Pakistan has to balance between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's the first story. The second story, in all this, there's a greater relationship or the animosity between US and Iran. That's not going away, right? If that is not going away and Israel just reinforces that animosity, and with the kind of terrorist attacks which have, and we spoke about this in the return of global
Yes.
terror, right? ISKP and all that. And I don't see USA stepping out of this in a hurry. And USA will use its leverage with Taliban, and its use with leverage its you know power with Pakistan to go against Iran. So where does all this leave Pakistan? That's the
See,
question.
Southwest Asia is a cauldron which very few people understand. Pakistan's strategic space, we all understand, is one of the most important strategic spaces around the world. I always like to explain it in the form of the confluence of civilizations, how around this area, India, China, Central Asia, Persia, Arab, five civilizations all meet here. And Pakistan has got something to give and something to take from everyone. including the United States, which is not even a civilization, which is a neighbor out here, right? From the United States or from the Western world, access to Afghanistan. Throughout the 20 years that the war was fought in Afghanistan, the access was from here. There were no airheads made in Tajikistan or Uzbekistan. The cost of the war would have been something phenomenal if it had happened at all. So the importance of Pakistan will temporarily recede from time to time. At this moment, because it is economically so weak, right? And because socially it is in a bit of a turmoil, and because it is being threatened by extraneous elements, etc., the world's attention is on it, and everyone is concerned that this area must not go into flames completely, because flames from here tend to travel into the Middle East, into Europe, into India, everywhere. So that's the major concern at the moment. No one wants this area in turmoil. The United States, therefore, will continue to support Pakistan to a great extent. When Iran supports Pakistan with cooperation in terms of financial cooperation, for the United States, it's not something which is against its interests. It wants to keep Pakistan stable. And if someone else is bankrolling that, they have no problems. The Saudis keep bankrolling Pakistan from time to time with the same purpose, to make sure that it offsets the Saudi influence here. If it is the Iranian influence here, if it is only Iran which is allowed to sort of bankroll Pakistan and none of the Arab states come to its aid completely, you will find that the power balance within the OIC itself will become very adverse. So this is a lot to do with the balance of power within the Islamic world itself. Ultimately, it boils down to the Shia-Sunni balance from Iran and from Saudi Arabia. Ultimately, it comes down to that. But in the case of India and in the case of Pakistan particularly, because it's an Islamic nation, 15% Shia population, right? You can't take away the fact that 15% Shia population is close to about 30 million Shias, which are there, which is a large number, and they owe allegiance to Iran. Pakistan would always want that this kind of a thing should continue, right? This kind of an interest of Iran should always continue. India's relationship with Iran is also based very largely on the very large Shia population. We've got 25 to 28 million Shia population in India too, right? So this is the manner in which you got to look at it. You know, it's a complex kind of an equation between nations. No black and white to say there are clear-cut demarcated lines here, and so is in so-and-so camp, and so-and-so is in so-and-so camp. All are in everyone's camp here. And everyone is competing with the other for influence in that area.
Yeah. So the last one, sir, I'll take before I go for the questions. Where does it leave India? Because I see India has an opportunity. It also has, there's also a threat in this whole story that our energy supplies could get, interfered with heavily. So could our fertilizers, because a lot of fertilizers of ours comes from the Gulf. So that also is at risk. And how do we balance this? And after all, we also have the advantages that we have good equations with Israel and Iran. So how do you see India's role in this whole story?
Firstly, let me give a word of praise for our government that for the last 10 years, even prior to that, the previous governments worked a lot on their Middle Eastern policy. But Mr. Modi has been able to walk the talk completely in very, very turbulent times in the Middle East. During the whole period of the ISIS and things like that, we have been able to build our relationship further with the Saudis, with the UAE, with Israel. I mean, all them, with Qatar also. Our relationship on the face of it, it may have seemed that, you know, Qatar has been awkward with us in our relationship, but ultimately at the end of the day also they played ball with us. So our relationship has been fairly good. They've managed to hold their own in terms of this. We are one nation who will not want to see one bullet fired anywhere in the Gulf, Middle Eastern region, because that has an effect on us, and particularly on our diaspora there, and our remittances which come from there, and the supply of energy. All these things, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, all are very, very important for us. And this is an opportunity where India is so far, I think we are too deeply involved with elections at the moment. And so, therefore, we are not perhaps showing that kind of an upfront focus towards this policy, but a lot must be happening inside the MEA, and our external affairs minister, who's a hands-on diplomat himself, must be under tremendous kind of a pressure to take initiatives, to look at initiatives. I think, come the elections, something more positive will emerge. Already, the external affairs minister has spoken to Israel and spoken to Iran. No doubt, we have to further ensure that we can kind of build up a coterie of diplomats who can go on some kind of a shuttle diplomacy. This is something which the diplomatic corps in India keeps talking about very often. Whenever I meet a lot of former retired and very reputed ambassadors who keep saying that one issue that we need to do is to exploit our understanding, civilizational understanding of the Middle East, that no one really has as good as we have got. And with that outreach, perhaps look at methodologies of shuttle diplomacy, etc., carrying messages from one to the other, things which cannot be spoken directly between people, may not be entirely adversaries, but people who are potential adversaries. So at least you can get some kind of a diplomatic, work
Back and forth
going.
going.
Yeah, that work back and forth, keep going. That's the role that India needs to perhaps play. And now with the elections and in a month and a half's time, perhaps, I think this 1.5 months, not much is going to happen in the Middle East, right? A break has taken place in Iran and Israel. Their focus is going to be on Gaza. Hopefully, we can look at a potential ceasefire at some stage or the other, but that gives us a little breathing space. And I think once the new government comes in place, this will be one of the areas where the government will probably jump into it in terms of foreign relations very, very early. They did it in 2014 also, if you remember. Prime Minister Modi, of course, visited Bhutan, visited Nepal, and all those countries, but he also visited the UAE very, very early. And he visited Saudi Arabia, and there was a whole host of other countries that he went to in those 3-4 years in the first part of his government, of his tenure. So that's the way I look at India's role. Yes, this is a very important thing for our energy security. Mercifully, we do have the Russian resources available to us for the moment. So it is not going to sort of be something of like an emergent in nature at the moment. But we are the last among the nations who would ever want to see any kind of a blockade happening in the Persian Gulf or in the Red Sea or any of these areas.
Yeah, I think so, sir. You highlighted there's a great opportunity, and I think once the election fever goes off and the new government is in place, it will hit the ground running. In fact, it will have to hit the ground running. Otherwise, our interests are at stake out there. I think so. We've covered tremendous ground. We've covered almost every angle of the shifting red lines in West Asia. In fact, we've also identified a lot of red lines which people probably never knew earlier. So I'll take a few questions, sir. The first question, it's been waiting for here for the past 6 hours, so I thought I must take it. How secure is the wealth of UAE and Saudi Arabia without a strong army in case of a flare-up? Capital flows overnight like water in conflict.
Yes, a relevant question. First of all, in the context of the Middle East, most countries always have armed forces based on the context of their threat perceptions. If India has got 1.3 million army, it is based on not on our wishful thinking only. It's based on a very, very strong analysis of what our threat perceptions are and what our requirements are. So obviously the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which are rich countries, they have all the technologies from the West. The United States provides much more aid and otherwise arms sales to the UAE and Saudi than perhaps any other parts of the world. So they've got all that with them. Notwithstanding that, I do recall way back in 1979, when the major incidents were happening in the Middle East, the one nation on which the Saudis depended hugely to protect even their royal family was Pakistan.
Yeah. Even now,
Surprisingly, even now, to a great extent, even now, two brigades from Pakistan were called for. One armored brigade and one infantry brigade. Both the brigades went to Saudi Arabia. They did participate in the 1990 Gulf War too. I mean, they had minor roles, but they played a role there. And they were the ones who established that relationship of trust between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, which got dented to some extent 2 years ago when with Mohammed bin Salman, they had some differences between Imran Khan and the Saudi government at that time. So, no doubt you're right. I mean, whenever the perception is there, they will go to someone for protection. But I don't think that situation is existing at the moment. Someone who will always want to come to the aid of the Saudi is the US. US
they're
is
already there.
already
They're
there.
sitting in
They're
Qatar.
already there, sitting in various in Dammam and places like that. They're already there.
There.
So that is why you don't require additional troops to secure the wealth as such. That is already secured, so
Yeah.
to say.
The next question says, interesting question. Both Israel and Pak were created by the British. It would be reasonable to conclude that aside from the Great Game, the present conflict zone spans between these two territories. Your views? This is a new Great Game, which
Yeah,
and this ends
I'm
are
aware of. Yeah, this is one of my favorite subjects, no doubt. The old Great Game. If you were talking about a new Great Game, there was an old Great Game. If you remember, the area of Central Asia, essentially stepping down into Afghanistan, primarily to keep the Golden Bird. Golden Bird was India, right? The Golden Bird of the British Empire was India, to prevent influence of Russia, the Russian Empire, onto those areas, including later communist Russia, also preventing it impinging into Afghanistan and influencing these areas. It was all a hunt for the spheres of influence, right? That was the great game which was going on. The new great game is in a little bit of a greater expanse, and it looks at other different domains. The new great game is all about oil, energy, pipelines. It is about strategic highways, connectivity. The Belt and Road Initiative, for example, one of those things. These are all the things which can bring about a huge amount of influence. Once again, in the expanse of territory, I would put that territory somewhere between Xinjiang and the UAE, somewhere there. The huge expanse of territory with about 30 odd countries in this region, right? Very crucial region, near about the Pamir Knot, many of the areas around the Pamir Knot. Uh, 72 million population of Muslims in Central Asia. Those awaiting ideological tuitioning as such, right? That's a perception within the Islamic world that this is that population which was under Soviet Russian influence and can therefore easily be influenced from an Islamic angle subsequently. So this is all about the great game which is going on here. Not necessarily that the new great game has anything to do with the old great game. There's a flow out from it. The British may have created this, Israel itself and Pakistan, no doubt about it. But to now connect everything with that period, I think to my mind is strategically not very mature. Things have evolved. The Cold War has which came in the middle, changed the tone and tenor of the strategic aspects of this region very, very hugely. And therefore, whatever you're looking at today, in today's context, there are lots of new threats, opportunities, which are there existing in the moment, which have perhaps no connect to the British times.
Sir, will a Middle East without Netanyahu and Ayatollah move towards peace? Is enmity personality centric or nation centric today? Can Israel, Iran have peace post these two netas?
Nations don't change their policies overnight based upon personalities, right? I mean, if the Ayatollah dies tomorrow, it's just like the famous saying about the British king. The king is dead, long live the king. Right? The policies don't change overnight unless something very drastic. Democratically, it may happen sometimes. Like if Trump administration comes in, you're going to find a lot of things perhaps changing once again. The Biden administration has been very strong against Iran, but Trump would have been much stronger perhaps. Perhaps along with Israel's 2 missiles, they would have fired many more, perhaps Tomahawks, onto Israel just to message Israel at that particular time. Right? So policies don't drastically change as such. I do feel that Netanyahu or no Netanyahu, Israel would have still struck. Israel wouldn't have sat back on his haunches and said, 7th of October, what has happened is acceptable to us, and we promise not to respond and not to react. No, that can't happen. We are putting everything on Netanyahu at the moment. There are enough other leaders in Israel who are committed as much as Netanyahu is, same ideological kind of mindset. Same with the Ayatollah. Replacement of the Ayatollah will obviously lead to one more leader from the clergy itself. The clergy is weakened. That is a trend within Iran, that we have seen a lot of street turbulence. We have seen a lot of pushback from the population towards liberal thinking and things like that, towards democracy and democratic values. It'll take its time. It will not happen in a hurry in the near future. The IRGC is strong enough, very, very strongly placed, to ensure that whatever happened in the revolution is protected and kept as it is. Therefore, after the Ayatollah, another Ayatollah, someone else with a different name will emerge. And this standoff between Israel and Iran, I don't see it stopping anywhere in the near future, including this whole aspect of the two-state formula. The two-state formula, we don't know what it will lead to finally, if it comes about at all.
A very simple question, sir. Does the use of proxies and non-state actors not constitute a de facto direct involvement?
Not constitute a de facto direct involvement.
Direct involvement. He says there are no more proxies. It's almost a direct conflict between.
It's a quasi kind of a situation if you really look at it, where you find, when I described to you about proxies and non-state actors, that was from an angle of distancing, lack of a border, etc. The interests being sort of promoted in those areas. Now it's not necessary that everything will be direct. It's not necessary that every difference between Iran and Israel is going to result in an exchange of volleys of missiles and rockets at each other. I don't think so, right? And let me tell you, no one has done a study on the quantification aspect. There is a dearth of ammunition existing in the whole of Europe. There's a dearth of ammunition existing in Israel today, right? Israel has fired off a tremendous amount of ammunition to protect itself in terms of the Iron Dome. It has fired a lot of ammunition on Gaza. What is the state of ammunition today? We don't know. 1973, if I remember, a strategic airlift had to take place from the United States to Tel Aviv to bring in anti-tank missiles of that time. The first time that they brought the very famous anti-tank, the Sagar missiles and things like that, which were brought, suitcase missiles as they were called. They were brought in with a strategic airlift which took place at that time. So it's not as if Israel is all the time ready to fight. It can fight a 20-day war, 25-day war, 30-day war. This war has been going on for the better part of 6 months now.
6 months.
So it would have affected them logistically, it would have affected them also. So therefore, I don't foresee that this is only going to become a throwing of missiles and rockets at each other. This very, very indirect way of messaging through actions on the ground infiltration here, something hitting us, striking here, striking at an embassy or something. This will continue. This is because these are the ways you show your relevance. What happens in Kashmir? Let's take the same equation to Kashmir. What happens in Rajouri Punch area? A strike. 3 or 4 Indian Jawans have been unfortunately killed in action. 2 terrorists have died. And you find the reason is relevance. Pakistani terrorists, sponsored actors, all message that we are here. We are still here. Don't think we have disappeared. So this is the aspect of proxies which is very important.
Yeah. Will China support Iran against Israel? It can also lead to an axis of Sino-Islamic nation unifying to oppose Western-backed Israel.
No black and white. China's very famous strategy is always gray zone. And I don't think, well, yes, they will take the best of whatever they can do to support Iran. They have supported Iran for very long. In fact, much of the missilery which has come to Iran has come from China. The support of China, North Korea, the Nordong missile, if you remember, of 1990s of that time. So a lot of this has happened over a period of time. But China and Israel do not have a adversarial relationship between them. There has been a degree of cooperation between the two of them. So I think a situation here, just like India has good relationship with Iran, good relationship with Israel, urging to bring about peace, etc. Why should nations take sides? Not necessary. They will work as per the principle of interest, nothing else.
Yeah. So enjoy General Hasnain's thoughts as always. That's very nice. That's why I get him here on Ghana Shot, because a lot of you enjoy this thing. Can you please have a session on how to do strategic thinking, benefits, drawbacks, etc.? For instance, the Ukraine prediction. So he's asking us, how do we think strategically?
Well, dekho, today, let me say on a lighter note. Someone rang me up today from a daily. It was a Hindi daily, and told me, sir, I'm writing an article. मैं कहा बहुत अच्छा है, जरूर लिखिए आप. कहते हैं मेरा आर्टिकल सर उसके ऊपर है कि मैं देख रहा हूं कि सर एकदम से ये चीन ने जो है ना अपना बदलाव ले आया है अपने पूरे स्ट्रेटजी में. मैं क्या बदलाव लाया है? कहते हैं साहब वो अब डायरेक्ट लड़ाई नहीं करता है, अब वो सिर्फ इंफॉर्मेशन से लड़ाई करता है. मैंने कहा मगर मैं तो ये पिछले 25 साल से पढ़ रहा हूँ. ठीक है, 1990 से तो ये गल्फ वॉर को, जब गल्फ वॉर हुई थी तब से चीन ने इसको पढ़ा. 1993 में वॉर अंडर इंफॉर्मेशनाइज्ड कंडीशंस को लाए, 2003 में 3 वॉरफेयर स्ट्रेटजी को लाए. तो ये तो बड़ी पुरानी चीज है, इसको क्यों लिख रहे हो आप? कि नहीं मुझे तो बताया कि तो बिल्कुल नया है. तो मैंने कहा कि भाई अब यू सी दिस इज द थिंग, इट डज strategic analysis, writing and thinking is not an overnight affair. अगर आप समझते हैं कि जनरल शंकर ने आज शाम को पढ़कर और तब मेरे से सवाल पूछे हैं, then you got to think again. You got to think again. For he's been reading this for the better part of last 30 years or more. हम सब इसी में जुटे हुए हैं. ठीक है, फौज के अंदर रहकर हमें बहुत दफे ये होना पड़ा कि पेपर लिखना पड़ा या कोई ना कोई डिस्कशन के अंदर शिरकत करनी पड़ी, एंड थिंक दैट इज व्हाट डेवलप्ड आवर कैपेबिलिटी टू थिंक अबाउट दिस. नथिंग रॉन्ग इन इट. आप भी कर सकते हैं बिल्कुल, मगर आपको टाइम डिवोट करना पड़ेगा इसके लिए, और थोड़ा डायरेक्शन, थोड़ा गाइडेंस लेनी पड़ेगी, और टाइम पर आप छोटे विषयों के ऊपर जरूर लिखिए. डोंट जंप इनटू वॉर फाइटिंग सिचुएशंस एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. ब्रीफ एनालिसिस छोटी छोटी करिए और उससे अपना तौर तरीका जो है और कॉन्फिडेंस जो है उसको बढ़ाइए. टू कम बैक टू योर यूक्रेन प्रेडिक्शन, टू माय माइंड दिस ईयर यूक्रेन इज नॉट गोइंग एनीवेयर. ये चलता रहेगा सिचुएशन,
अगले साल
और
चलेगा.
हाँ, ये पूरे साल चलेगा, क्योंकि देखिए ये अमेरिकन इलेक्शन जो है ना, ये एक बहुत विचित्र चीज है पूरी दुनिया के लिए. अमेरिकन इलेक्शन इन्फ्लुएंसेस अ ट्रेमेंडस अमाउंट ऑफ डिसीजन, स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजन मेकिंग. And Biden may be behind Ukraine, but Ukraine is today suffering. They don't have that capability, and a lot of questioning is taking place within Europe. अगर कल ट्रंप आ गए आपको मालूम है ट्रम्प का क्या एटीट्यूड था नेटो के लिए? हाउ मच ऑफ सपोर्ट वाज ट्रम्प विलिंग टू एक्सटेंड टू नेटो? वी डोंट नो व्हाट्स गोइंग टू हैपन टुमारो टू इट. तो देयरफॉर ये बड़ी अनप्रेडिक्टेबल स्थिति है इस वक्त. बट एटलीस्ट दिस ईयर टिल नवंबर दिसंबर I think there are going to be no outcomes on the Ukrainian front.
Yeah, I want to chip in, sir, with the issue of strategic thinking जो आपने बताया पढ़ने के लिए, सीखने के लिए, महसूस करने के लिए. I'd like to put across to everyone, this Gunner Shot channel is only for this, to democratize, strategic thinking, to bring home all of you as to what goes into defending India. See how rise of India is anchored. How can India be defended militarily? How can India be defended geopolitically, economically? Because what I do, I just don't touch strategic issues. I touch economy, I touch geopolitics, I talk military, everything. So, and even technology, right? And different things, so that all of you get an idea. And like I always say, on this channel, you'll get the best. You'll get the best of strategic thinkers, you'll get the best of military thinkers, you'll get the best of diplomatic thinkers to come and talk here, and technologists. And that is how we have to learn from each other and go ahead. The second part of this, if you see, you go to any other channel, I'm not boasting, I'm telling this as a matter of fact. You go to any other channel, they want to finish a program within 1 hour, and within that, whatever 4-5 questions, they take money for it and finish it off. Here, I don't do that. It doesn't matter if you take a little more time. I request my guests to be here. It doesn't matter whether you pay me or not, that $1 or $2, 100 or 200 rupees. It doesn't matter, right? Like I always say, all that money goes to teaching some girl her basic schooling or giving her a little computer or something. But I make an endeavor to answer all your questions. Besides this, on every Sunday, I have an open session where you can ask me any question and I answer it patiently, because it is only then that we can develop a strategic culture in India. And unless the normal person on the street understands the issues of India, we as a nation cannot progress. So your views on what I've said?
Bhai, you have taken away a piece of what I have always thought. जब मैं सुपरिटेंडेंट हुआ 2013 में, मेरा भी विचार ही यही था. I entered into this world of strategic analysis only because of this, and I started writing. मैं लिखता हूँ अखबारों में ताकि लोगों को आइडियाज हों, पर्टिकुलरली फ्रॉम अ मिलिट्री एंगल. लोग समझते हैं कि मिलिट्री वाले जो हैं वो सिर्फ मिलिट्री सब्जेक्ट पे लिख सकते हैं. हम बहुत चीजों पर लिख सकते हैं, कल्चर पर लिख सकते हैं, सिविलाइजेशन पर लिख सकते हैं, इतिहास पर लिख सकते हैं, बहुत चीजों के ऊपर हम अपनी तवज्जो दे सकते हैं. The idea was or is also to dispel this thought process from the minds of people कि फौज में पढ़ाई नहीं होती है. ठीक है, अगर आप कभी फौज के अंदर आएंगे इस गलत फहमी के साथ, you will be the most disappointed person, क्योंकि हमने फौज में आकर कभी पढ़ना बंद ही नहीं किया. 24 घंटे पढ़ते रहे हम हर वक्त. इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द ग्रोथ प्रोसेस ऑफ अ इंडिविजुअल कि आप अपने मेन प्रोफेशन में रहिए. इफ टुमारो लेट्स से you're a computer scientist, मैं बहुत लोगों को ये कहता हूँ, कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड में जाकर कहता हूँ कि भाई देखिए आप यू आर अ वंडरफुल कॉर्पोरेट लीडर, बट साथ में थोड़ा दाहिने और बाएं भी देखिए. It will help you tremendously to understand. अगर if you understand basic geopolitics, if you understand science and technology, इससे कितनी आपकी बढ़ोतरी होगी अपने प्रोफेशन के अंदर. Then people realize it and they think about it in that particular manner. So what Jan Shankar has said is absolutely 100% strategic culture. भारत के अंदर एक सिंपल एग्जांपल आप देख लीजिए. डिफेंस का बजट जो है कितनी देर लगती है उसको पास करने में, और रेलवे का बजट देखिए एक पूरे दिन लगता है. तब भी लगता था, अब तक तो शायद अभी बंद हो गया है. मगर डिफेंस बजट पे क्या होता है, कोई कंट्रीब्यूट ही नहीं करता है इसके ऊपर टू टॉक अबाउट एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ डिफेंस. तो that just shows the lack of understanding and the interest that people take in this subject. Everyone wants to hear about geopolitical aspects, but to contribute and give a thought through and well analyzed opinion on something, it takes quite some effort to do that. This is what we are looking in terms of enhancing the strategic culture of India.
Yeah. Uh, Sir, we always get the best from here. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your commitment. Your analysis on Chinese front is awesome. Thanks a lot for this. But I'm going to tell you why I said this is we're going to take a break for 2 days because I have to go to Delhi for a seminar in which General Hasnain and I both will be on speaking. Right, that's day after tomorrow. Come back on 25th, 26th. I'm going to do continuous shows on China. And one, I'm going to talk about the Chinese rope trick. We've heard of the Indian rope trick. I'm going to talk of the Chinese rope trick, which they're doing on all of us. Right? And then I'm going to talk of the India-China Cold War, which has started. So both these are important things. Just join me. Until then, sir, thanks a lot. Today, I thought was a fantastic show because we covered a large ground and didn't stay focused on Iran and Israel. And we've covered like someone said, from Pakistan right to Israel, we covered every country in between. Thank you for your views. Enjoyed myself. And I
Thank
thought
you.
the questions were also very good.
या वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन. नहीं,
Very
आप
good.
हमारी ऑडियंस जो है बहुत बढ़िया ऑडियंस है. They think through their questions and they ask them in a very very polite and interesting way, educated way. तो जरा मजा आता है इस तरह के प्रोग्राम में बात करने के लिए. My compliments and congratulations to you and to the entire audience, everyone, all our viewers.
Thanks a lot, sir. We'll live up to everyone's expectation and including people like you who come and make Gunner Shot what it is. Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Thank you.
And Jai Hind, sir.